In the summer of 1893, almost 30 million people traveled to a city that should not have existed. It had palaces with domes taller than cathedrals, streets wider than anything in Paris, a statue of a goddess, gilded in gold, standing 65 feet over a lagoon. People called it the most beautiful place ever built on American soil. It lasted 6 months. Then it burned to the ground, and almost nobody tried to stop it. Today, a theory is spreading online. Millions of people believe that buildings like this one, and hundreds like it across the world, are proof of a lost, advanced civilization, erased on purpose, hidden from us. They call it Tartaria. They're wrong about almost everything, but they're right that something was erased. And the real reason is somehow even stranger than the myth. Here's the theory as it exists online today. Somewhere before the 1800s, there was a global technologically advanced empire called Tartaria. Free energy, wireless power, architecture too perfect, too grand, too advanced to have been built by ordinary people of that era. Then, according to the theory, a catastrophic mud flood buried entire cities up to their first floor. What we now call basements, the theory claims, were actually ground-level entrances of buried Tartarian buildings. And after the flood, a secret group of elites rewrote history. They stole the architecture, scrubbed the records, and erased an entire civilization from human memory. It is, by any measure, one of the biggest viral phenomena in the history content space. Hundreds of millions of views. Entire YouTube channels built around nothing else. Historians at Oxford, at the University of Chicago, at institutions around the world have examined this theory directly. Their conclusion is unanimous. There was no hidden empire, no mud flood, no global cover-up. But here's what almost nobody talks about. The buildings the theory points to, the ones that supposedly prove Tartaria existed, those buildings did exist, some of the grandest ones on Earth. And almost every single one of them really was destroyed, deliberately, on purpose, by the very people who built them. That's not a conspiracy, that's a fact. And it's where our story actually begins. Chicago, 1890. The city wins the right to host the World's Columbian Exposition, a fair to celebrate 400 years since Columbus reached the Americas. But this isn't really about Columbus. This is about proving something. 22 years earlier, Chicago had burned to the ground in the Great Fire. The city was still seen by much of the world as a loud, dirty, unrefined industrial town. Chicago wanted to prove it could build something the whole world would have to respect. So they hired the best architects in the country and gave them an impossible deadline. 600 acres of swampland on the shore of Lake Michigan. Over 200 buildings. Domes modeled on St. Peter's Basilica. Colonnades that mimicked ancient Rome and Greece. And here's the detail that, today, fuels the entire Tartaria myth. Almost none of it was real stone. The architects used a material called staff, a mixture of plaster, cement, and jute fiber, sprayed and molded over wood and steel frames. From 10 feet away, it looked exactly like solid marble, cold to the touch, gleaming white in the sun. It was never meant to last. It was meant to impress, for one summer, then disappear. They called it the White City. For 6 months, nearly 27 million people walked through it, at a time when the entire US population was just 65 million. Visitors saw the first Ferris wheel ever built, the first all-electric nighttime cityscape most Americans had ever witnessed. Over 90,000 incandescent bulbs, more electricity than the rest of Chicago combined. To people walking out of gaslit homes into a city of pure white light at night, it must have felt like stepping into the future. or somewhere outside of time entirely. Then, on October the 30th, 1893, 5 days before the fair officially closed, Chicago's mayor, Carter Harrison, was assassinated in his own home. The fair's closing ceremony was cancelled. The city went into mourning, and the White City was left standing, empty, unguarded. Within months, fires started breaking out across the grounds. Some accidental, some deliberately set by vandals and the homeless men sheltering in the abandoned palaces through the brutal Chicago winter. By July of 1894, most of what remained was deliberately burned in a final massive blaze that lit up the Chicago skyline one last time. If this were a one-time event, it might just be a strange footnote in American history. It wasn't. 11 years later, St. Louis builds an even bigger fair, the Louisiana Purchase Exposition. Over 1,500 buildings, 75 miles of internal roads, a budget equivalent in today's money to over $500 million. It was, at the time, the largest fair ever built anywhere on Earth. And once again, same playbook. Plaster and steel staff architecture, built to awe, never built to last. Wireless telephone technology was demonstrated there for the first time. So was a working X-ray machine. The technology on display genuinely was decades ahead of what most fairgoers had ever seen. This is the detail Tartaria believers always leave out. The real fairs already contained some of the most advanced technology on Earth for their time. They didn't need a hidden civilization. They had Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, and the full force of the Gilded Age's industrial ambition pointed at one plot of land for a single summer. When the fair closed in December 1904, the demolition crews didn't even wait for an excuse. They started taking the city apart almost immediately. Within 2 years, nearly all 1,500 buildings were gone. This is the moment in the story where you have to ask the obvious question. Why? Why would two of the most advanced, most beautiful cities in American history, places that took millions of dollars and the best engineering minds in the country to build, be deliberately destroyed within months of completion? The answer isn't a cover-up. It's something almost more unsettling. It was the plan the entire time. World's fairs were never meant to be permanent. They were built on borrowed land, on borrowed money, with one purpose: to make a single summer unforgettable, then disappear before the bill came due. Permanent stone architecture at that scale would have taken a decade and 10 times the budget. So architects developed staff specifically to solve a financial problem, build something that looks eternal for the price of something disposable. It worked exactly as designed, almost too well, because what those architects didn't plan for was the feeling it would leave behind. People walked through 6 months of impossible beauty, then watched it vanish, and the loss never fully left the culture's memory. That feeling didn't disappear. It just changed shape. By the time American cities started replacing their ornate Beaux-Arts train stations, courthouses, and post offices with parking garages and glass towers in the mid-1900s, that same grief resurfaced. People looked at old photographs of buildings that no longer existed, buildings more beautiful than anything being built around them, and they didn't know the real reason why. So, generations later, the internet gave them one: a hidden empire, a cover-up, Tartaria. The truth is sadder and somehow more human than the myth. Nobody erased an advanced civilization. We built something extraordinary on purpose, knowing it would only exist for a few months. And then we grieved it for over a century without realizing that's what we were doing. So the next time someone tells you that the grand white buildings in old photographs prove a lost civilization was erased, you can tell them the truth. There was no mud flood, no hidden empire, no global cover-up. There was something better and stranger. Human beings, in a single generation, building the most beautiful cities the world had ever seen. On purpose, knowing they would tear it all down themselves. If you enjoyed uncovering the real story behind this myth, subscribe the channel. There's more history like this still to explore. Thanks for watching.